Welcome back to the Investor Professor Podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 35. We're going to talk about wash sales and taxes. Boy, these topics I keep coming up with, they're just getting better and better, right? Just everybody loves to talk about taxes, but it's important. We're also going to talk about some of the craziness in the market. I mean, what a difference a year makes. It's completely different than it was a year ago. So we'll talk about some of the annual reports I've been reading. I'll point out some highlights of what's going on in the market, and we'll just, keep doing the best we can. So get your mind right. Think about your goals. Let's get to work.
You dropped this.
Okay, well, welcome back to the program. It's crazy, man. The market, it's completely different. So the NASDAQ right now is already down 13.4% for the year. You have the S&P 500 almost down 9%, and you have the S&P 500 down 8%. And so just to, think about a couple things here, just some market definitions for you. A correction is considered a 10% drop, and a bear market is considered a 20% drop from the previous highs. So when you look at this, we're already hitting kind of bear market territory when you look at where we were in November and December, the last time we were at all-time highs. So it's a completely different market than it was a year ago, but that shouldn't deter you. I've traveled over the last couple of weeks. I was seeing clients, talking with people, and I got to be honest with you, when I'm analyzing stocks, it's actually easier for me to see clearer on what's a good value when stocks are not hitting 52-week highs all the time, right? So that, to me, is a more difficult market, even though we might have to go through some pain here, especially if you're younger and you have a long time horizon. You should be excited that you're able to invest in some of your, favorite names at a lower price. And so it's going to be more beneficial for you long term. But one of the ones that I look at, that I've been looking at the most, is Google. So I believe we talked about how, Google, their last earnings report, they announced that they're growing at 36% earnings, which is just absolutely incredible. And they also announced that they're doing that 20-for-1 stock split that's going to happen in July, as long as shareholders vote on it or vote for it in June, which should be the case. But what's funny about that is that before they announced that, their stock price was $27.52, so $2,752. After they announced all that goodness, their stock went up to $29.79, right? So it jumped $200 basically from where it was, and today it sits at $26.09. So now it's actually down $150 from where they made that great report. And so I look at that as almost like free money. Like, I look at that and go, wow, I get to buy Google at this price, and I know the good news that of their earnings, of their stock split, all this kind of stuff, and now I get to buy it cheaper than it was before they even made that announcement. Because, I know we have all this stuff going on with Ukraine and Russia, and that's really caused the market to have a lot of turbulence over the last 2 weeks. But in the grand scheme of things, how is that going to impact Google, right? And that's kind of how you have to think, because in 3 years, is it really going to matter? And so, obviously I'll talk about it, but I would be shocked if Google isn't around $3,000 before they do that split. And so we'll see. We'll see. But I think that is a good way to look at this, to be able to take advantage of good companies, because there's a lot of good companies out there. There's also a lot of bad companies, right? I'm looking at you, ROKU. That was not a good quarter. So, this is your opportunity to buy into some stocks that, that you're willing to hold for the long term. So when you look at Roku, who had just a horrendous quarter, you look at Roku, and on July 19th of last year, they were $473 a share. And right now they're at $112. I mean, that is brutal. What is that, 80% drop? So Roku does the streaming for, your TV. You have the Roku TVs, and you're able to stream and get to Amazon Prime and Netflix and all that kind of stuff. But they've had some supply chain issues. They haven't done things necessarily correctly with demand. There's not as much demand for TVs as there was pre-pandemic. So this is like the TV version of Peloton at this point. Things are not looking good, but at the end of the day, at some point, everything becomes maybe a good price to dip your toe in. I wouldn't say that right now on Roku by any means, but at some point, speaking of, going back to my Google conversation just a minute ago, when you look at their PE ratio, it's 23 now. So a PE ratio of 23 for a company like Google is extremely low. Not saying it can't get lower, but over the last 5 years, their average PE ratio has been 30. And so that's a big deal that they've moved down this much. Just some tremendous value. And I know not everybody can buy a $2,600 stock, which is one of the reasons why they're going to split that stock, as we've talked about in previous episodes. But if you can even buy partial shares or whatever, this could be a great opportunity. So those are kind of my 2 cents on that. I'll share another that has been intriguing me, and that is Goodyear Tires. Their symbol is GT. This is probably one that wouldn't be on many people's radar, but when they reported earnings, they had the worst day in 35 years for the company. So they went from, what is this, $22.50 down to $15.76. It's now currently at $16. But their PE ratio is currently 5. And that is just tremendously low. Now, the one thing that kind of bothers me here is they don't pay a dividend. I probably would have invested in it already if it paid a dividend. But this is one I'm looking into, trying to figure out. I mean, they were pretty honest about some of the supply chain issues that they have. But that should be shorter term. This could be one. I mean, if you're willing to hold it for 3 years, or so. Goodyear Tire at $16. PE ratio of 5. If you look at their forward earnings, the PE ratio is closer to 4. I mean, that is, I don't know. I mean, even if you gave them a PE ratio of 10, the stock would be trading closer to $30 a share. So that's almost 100% pop if they get back to a normal PE ratio. A PE ratio of 4 or 5 is just extremely low. So I don't know. I haven't done a ton of homework into this. I've done a little bit. I gotta do more, but just one that I thought I'd put on your radar because it is important to kind of look for these stocks that have gotten beaten up. In this kind of market, investors get so tired of losing money that they just start giving up on things. And so when they start giving up on good companies, that becomes an opportunity that you can say, man, transferring money from the impatient to the patient. That's what we do. We transfer money from the impatient to the patient. So you got to make sure you're prepared to take advantage of some of these opportunities that are going to be out there. So this is also starting to be one of my favorite times of year. I know most people, it's the holidays. I mean, I like the holidays too, but don't you love like earnings report season? No, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that loves getting these annual reports. So if you follow me on Instagram or the Investor Professor on Instagram, you'll notice that I started yesterday. I highlighted StarBucks because that was one of the first annual reports I've received. And so I'll keep doing that, pointing out as I get these and I start reading them, just pointing out some of the highlights of them. But I can't even, I can't what's the word I'm looking for here? I can't, the value in these annual reports cannot be understated. There we go. It cannot be understated. So when you're watching the news, you just hear all the noise, right? I mean, we did a whole episode on this, just noise, the people talking about, political issues, just all the stuff going on. And so these annual reports really serve as kind of like, what are companies trying to accomplish? And so yesterday, I took pictures of Starbucks' annual report, but you can go back there and look, but looking at some of this stuff, you can see, like I highlighted, how much they've done in share repurchases, right? Buying their own shares back over the last 3 years. I pointed out how much in dividends they've paid. And the total between share buybacks and dividends over the last 3 years has been $17.7 billion. And you have to realize that the last 3 years have not been great for Starbucks, right? With COVID and everything. I mean, they had to shut down stores. They had to kind of go through a wonky reopening. I mean, there's a lot of issues with that, right? They're right in the crosshairs kind of doing that. So their ability to still be able to do that is tremendous. You'll notice that it tells you how many stores they have. Right now, there's 33,833 Starbucks stores. We highlighted that that they have 7% growth over the last 2 years in America's stores and 17% in China. And so this allows you to kind of give you a kind of a guide for the companies that you invest in to see how they're truly doing. Now, I know many of y'all saw that I was at Disney World a week ago, which is why I didn't do an episode. But, geez, man, I don't know if you've ever been to Disney World, but as a dad, when you go to Disney World, when you walk in, they take you on a separate line and they put you in a machine and they turn you upside down and they just shake you until all the money in your pocket has come out, and then they let you go into the park. Like when you go to Disney World, it is amazing to see how that thing operates. I've been a couple times, but every time I go, I'm just constantly looking at the stock while I'm there, saying, man, if I would have bought Disney in 2000, what would it be worth today? 1995. I mean, the way that business is run is just absolutely incredible. So there's just tons of opportunity out there to be able to buy into good companies if you're willing to hold them. And we're going to talk about why it's important to hold them, because today's main topic is going to be the wash sell rule. And I've got some pretty good examples of this for you. So I always wonder, like, when should I put the disclosure in? And this is definitely, anytime you're going to talk about taxes, this is definitely the time for a disclosure. So, this is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not your financial advisor or your tax advisor. So, before you do anything, talk to your financial advisor, talk to your tax advisor. Past performance is not indicative of future results. All right, there we go. All right, so this year, because of the chaos of last year and everybody trading and so many people day trading and doing all that stuff, I just keep hearing horror stories. I keep reading horror stories. So let me explain to you just a little bit on how investment taxes work. Okay, so there's something called short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains. And short-term capital gains are defined as holding an investment for less than a year. And so then obviously long-term capital gains is if you've held the investment for longer than a year. Okay. So if you've held an investment for less than a year, the taxes you're going to pay is your regular income tax bracket, right? And so you can look those up pretty easily. But if you make less than $10,000 a year, it's 10%, and then it just starts to go up after that. Now, the thing that is important to keep in mind is that long-term capital gains, if you're single and you make less than $40,000 a year, you pay nothing on long-term capital gains. So that is incentive enough to start becoming an investor and not just a trader. And if you're married, it's if you make less than $80,000. Well, this year it's going to be, if you want the exact number, $83,350. Long-term capital gains will be zero. But again, if you own it for less than a year, it's going to be your regular income tax bracket. So here's how a conversation with me and somebody this past week went. Friend of mine who I don't manage money for, he handles his own investments, comes up to me, says, man, oh my gosh, I thought that I, made a lot of money and I got my 1099. So a 1099 is what your broker sends to you, letting you know what all your activity was at the end of the year. And so those have been coming out. Most companies have to have those out to you by the 15th of February. If there's some issues or something special, maybe it's a little bit later, but mostly around the 15th. And so everybody started getting these 1099s, and the 1099 again tells you what your, how much you made, what your capital gains are. Are they short term? Are they long term? All this kind of stuff. And he goes, man, I've been trading all year, and I thought I made money, but I didn't make any money. Actually, I lost money because I have all these capital gains I have to pay, and I don't know why. And I said, well, is it because of the wash sell rule? And he goes, wash sell rule? What's that? And I go, oh, man. I go, okay. So here's how the wash sell works. If you sell a company, a stock, for a loss, and you buy it back within the next 30 days, it negates that loss. Right? So let's say you bought, I don't know, GameStop, and it starts to go down, and you sell it, and you take $1,000 loss. But then you buy it back 2 days later, and it goes up, and you sell it, and you make $1,000. Well, because you bought it back, so you sold it for like a loss. You thought you had a loss for $1,000, and then you sell it because you think you have a gain for $1,000, and you think, hey, great, I'm at zero. Well, that's not the case, because the IRS does not let you take that $1,000 loss because you bought the stock back within that 30-day window. And so there are a lot of people who are learning this the hard way this year because, of course, since they were trading, those are all short-term capital gains. And so they're paying their regular income tax bracket rather than paying like long-term capital gains at a much lower rate. So that is a problem, because if you make, over $100,000 a year, you're paying 24%. And then if you're, making really good money, you're paying 32, 35%. So there's a lot of investors, traders who are out there who are learning this lesson the hard way. So you have to think about, especially as your income goes up, what the tax ramifications of what you're doing is how that's going to impact you long term. And so, for example, I'll have a client call me and say, hey, I want to get out of this stock. And you can go look. If you go look, you can look and see how many days you have left until it becomes long-term capital gains. So when you go to whatever brokerage firm you're using, TD Ameritrade, Schwab, Robinhood, whatever it is, when you log into your account, there should be a place there when you're looking at it that tells you what your gain loss is. I'm going to pull one up real quick so I can give you the right deal here. Yeah, so you'll have a little place it might say gain loss, it might say cost basis. I think most of them will say cost basis. So if you click on that, it'll come up and it'll tell you unrealized positions, which means positions that you still own. And it'll normally give you a summary. There will be a little button that says summary. And it'll tell you what you own, tell you what your short-term gain loss is and long-term. So it'll say ST or LT, right, for short-term or long-term. But normally there's a button where it says summary. If you click on that button, there should be one that says details. And it'll tell you, like, for each one, how long it's going to take for it to become long-term. So normally it'll say LT again. But like the one I'm looking at right now, it'll tell you like LT in 18 days. And then if it's paid you dividends, right? If you're just having the dividends reinvest, it'll tell you LT in 84 days, LT in 175 days. So the computer will track how long you have until it becomes a long-term capital gain. So if I have a client that says, hey, I want to sell this stock, one of the first things I do is I go look and see, if it's part of their strategy or whatever, because somebody might be nervous that the stock's going to drop. And especially if it's somebody who's a high net worth individual or a high tax bracket individual, I'll say, look, we got 15 days until this goes from short term to long term, right? Like there's no reason for us to sell this before it becomes a long-term capital gain. And they'll be like, okay, that makes sense. Let's wait. But you gotta be, aware of this. And then unfortunately, there's a lot of investors out there that are not aware of this at all. And they're learning this lesson the hard way, right? So it's all fun and games, like when people are in college and they're not making any money and they're just trading this stuff left and right. But when you get, your first big girl or boy job and you start making money and you start going into different tax brackets and you start, and you're trading like you were when you were an amateur, you got to graduate from that, right? You got to graduate from that and you got to start thinking about, okay, maybe this isn't the best. This isn't the best strategy because, like, for instance, my friend who thought they made a lot of money, now they actually owe money. Well, when I say they thought they made a lot of money, when they thought they broke even on their trades, all of a sudden now they're really negative because they didn't do their tax planning properly. And a lot of people, a lot of retail investors are not aware of that wash sell rule. So, you can learn about it here. You can even just Google it, right? And you can go to Investopedia and you can read about it. But man, you can only take, the other thing is you can only take $3,000 in investment losses a year. So, you can carry forward, but if somebody takes a massive loss, then, you got to be able to offset it with gains. But you got to take it. You got to be aware of the wash sell rule. And also that $3,000 loss is only in taxable accounts. So we're not talking about like your 401k or your IRA or anything like that, where, this doesn't apply, but normal brokerage accounts, this definitely applies. So you have to avoid the wash sell rule if you're going to, and be aware of it when it comes to your investment strategy. It's something you have to be aware of. So, just be careful with it. Okay, so just a couple more things before I let you go today. How are those goals doing, man? We're getting almost the end of February. We're maybe not thinking about them as much. It's cold outside. I mean, so, keep the focus. Keep the focus. I've been doing, since I've been traveling, I've been listening to a lot of books, a lot of good stuff. On our Instagram page, the great people who helped me out there put up a video of Warren Buffett. That was my request from 1999, a speech he gave in 1999 to high school seniors. And I kind of made a joke that I was a senior in high school in 1999. But if you have time, go listen to that. You can listen to it while you're working out. You don't have to watch it necessarily. You just need to listen to it. But listen to that, and you'll notice that a lot of the things that he discussed in 1999 not only came true, but they're also valuable for today. And I think that was when I listened to that clip or that video of him talking about that. That's kind of what I think about it. And man, do I wish I would have been in that room. But if I was in that room back then, I probably would not have had an open mind to really grasp it. I mean, that's kind of always the part too, right? They always say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so, you need to just listen to those just timeless wisdom that you can still apply to your investment strategy and life strategy today. So I hope you enjoy that and you go watch it. I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. Great to listen to while you're working out, walking, whatever it is. I try to listen to it probably at least once or twice a year. And I think it can bring a lot of value to you. So I hope you have a great week. I appreciate the shares. I appreciate you liking the podcast on Apple. We keep climbing there. So that has been a tremendous help for us. We really do appreciate it. And I hope you have a great week. Don't mistake activity for achievement. Thanks, everybody.